All right, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us and spending this time investing in your professional development and building your skills and knowledge as a teacher. We really appreciate you being here or tuning in if you're watching this recording. I'm so excited to have Dr. Pierson today presenting Make Reading Fun. I'll pass it over to her, and then at the end, I'll pop back in and ask you to complete a survey, and I'll let you know what our next and last webinar of this semester is going to be. And I'll go ahead and post this PowerPoint in the chat if you guys would like to have it. So Dr. Pierson, you can take it away.
Thank you. So thanks for being on today. It's such a busy time of year, but I guess that I think back when I was first teaching, I was in Ontario Montclair School District teaching elementary SDC and also junior high SDC. And then I taught in San Marcos Unified at San Marcos High School, and I taught SDC there as well. So I've taught all levels, and you know what? This is crazy, but I wake up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I could have taught this so much better. I've learned so much since those early days, right? So I'm hoping that you guys will share with me and with each other in this presentation ideas that you have, and maybe there are some new things, hopefully lots of new ideas that you'll be able to take away. And so I guess that I'm always learning and growing to this very day. I learned from my student teachers. I was a Cal State Fullerton student myself for my master's degree and my learning handicapped credential, which ages me greatly because that was the old mild moderate credential. So I did all of that at Cal State Fullerton, and then I went on to school at UC Riverside. So now I'm the department chair, which you guys probably know, and we do the study abroad programs. And in those study abroad programs, it gives us a lot of challenges on how do we make reading fun. So it's my current experiences, my past experiences, and it's one of those wake up in the middle of the night thing and try to figure out how we can be the best we can be. So I have a lot planned for us today, way more than what an hour is, but I don't want you to go away and not have a ton of ideas. So we're going to do kind of a little background talking about who this is for. So what type of students are we talking about? We're going to agree on some important reading goals that will support our struggling readers, which it sounds like the people on our call now that you guys are both teaching struggling readers daily. Hopefully you will take away some fun strategies. And some of them, I'm literally going to kind of go down a list to try to just get you thinking about ways that we can get students into reading. So it's not just like how to read stuff, but it's really on how to get them excited and thinking and acting and playing and being a part of stories. So hopefully it'll get us to be kind of opening our mind and thinking of some new things. I want us to create a plan of action. So how can we really implement some of these ideas into our classrooms? So as we go along, I know there's only two of you, and I also, my other thing is I don't put people on the spot. I really, truly don't. So if you don't participate or you're just chilling and you're relaxing after a busy day and you just want to listen, that's totally fine too. The silence that can be awkward in a Zoom, I can handle. So I'd love for you to participate, but if it's not in your plans for today, I get it. So don't even worry. So I can just talk to myself. I'm kidding. And my dog, my golden retriever sitting next to me. So, okay. So I'm going to ask you guys this question. And how do you know if someone is a good reader? What gives you that clue into what does a good reader sound like and what can a good reader do? So if something pops into the top of your head, you can share it. And if not, I will share my thoughts on what's a good reader.
Well, I think a good reader is someone who will I think they say metacognitive skills where they might try to relate to the reading or think about the reading in the context that relates to self and or text or whatever the experiences they may be, or drawing on prior knowledge.
Awesome. They try to make meaning out of it. Awesome. Yes, totally. That's great.
Fluency helps too.
Yes, absolutely. That fluency, being able to not trip over words, right? To be able to
Mhm.
read at the right pace and to be able to articulate what those words are without it being too painful. We'll talk a little bit about that throughout this presentation, kind of as different strategies pop up. So a good reader is someone who sounds natural. I already said they're not stumbling over their words. Their pacing is good. They use expression, pauses, or other changes in their voice or phrasing. They are able to correct errors. They can see right away if they mispronounce something. Understanding the meaning of the words or that passage, being able to explain the story to someone else. You just said relating that story to other information they know or their experiences prior, understanding how the sentences connect the ideas of the story. I don't know, I think you guys have kids possibly, and I know when my kids were little, they always wanted me to do the reading to them. They didn't want my husband. And it was because he read so monotone. He didn't make it exciting, right? So I said, honey, you've got to learn how to use expression, right? And make the reading fun. And so I think of that now when some of my student teachers are not making it as exciting as we can make it, or allowing kids possibly to read a passage out loud to the group. And it's slowing down the whole idea of learning that content. So we have to be aware of all of these things and how to facilitate that good reading, but also to keep everything moving along within a lesson. So if we look at skilled reading, what is skilled reading? And the pillars of skilled reading include that word identification, fluency, and comprehension. So word identification, the syllable types, the word parts, the spelling. You guys know all this. The fluency, that rate, the accuracy, expression. And then comprehension, that knowing that vocabulary, the prior knowledge, and sentence structure. So if we were to take 180 days of school times 20 minutes of reading every day, and hopefully more than that, because hopefully they're able to do some reading at home and that's supported, that gets us to almost 2 million words in a year, which is amazing. And so we know that the more we read and the more we support that fun reading, the better our students are going to understand language and the more they're going to be able to comprehend text. So we want to be good as teachers about really facilitating that frequent reading and making that fun. So choosing some goals for our struggling readers. I know you guys have goals up to your necks, right? Especially this time of year and in such a weird year. But some of the things I want you to think about, obviously we're using those pillars of skilled reading that I just went over. Those are the key aspects of reading we want to focus on, but we want to be realistic with our kids. So we want to set realistic goals so that they can actually meet those goals. They know what their goals are and they're working towards them. We want that reading practice to be consistent. So we want them to read aloud and also read often. And we want to encourage parents to do that. So maybe we might want to share some of these strategies today that might work for your parents. If you send out group emails, or if you do a little newsletter, or however you communicate with parents, you might want to share some different ideas on how they can facilitate more consistent reading at home. Obviously, we're celebrating strengths and successes. We always are doing that for our students, which is really fun when they've had some success. Setting that personal goal. So one of the things when I'm teaching classes, I always have you guys set goals. And we're going to do that today, actually. We're going to set that action plan. Hopefully we'll have time to get through everything, or at least get to that place where we're able to pick some different strategies we want to use tomorrow or this week for our students. And so do the same with your students. Set some personal goals by the week or by the day or by the month, where how much time do your students want to spend reading? Or you could look at it maybe not in time, but maybe in pages or books. How many pages do we want them to read, or how many books? I remember in third grade, my teacher did this. And of course, that made me speed through books much too quickly. So you'll have to figure out, based on personalities, what types of goals would be the best for which kids. But what about different kinds of books? So have them, a lot of times younger kids choose nonfiction books because they are interested in different science topics or animals or some different non-fiction topics. But Maybe we could have them read an adventure book, maybe a book about animals, maybe a book about a famous person, and have them think of all the different genres and have them go through as a goal for this month the different types of books we want them to focus on. And then as a teacher, which strategies work best? How do you best get your students excited about reading? And that's something that this whole presentation is focused on. And then of course, be patient. We know based on what we teach and based on our experiences already that sometimes reading is very difficult for students and very slow. And so there are different ways we can focus on helping them have success. So I'm hoping the ideas today will get us there and will reach all of the different students that you guys are teaching. So you can be ready to share one that you already use if you feel comfortable. Or you can identify one from the presentation that you think will work right away for your students. And both of you are teaching elementary, and I have some really good elementary experiences, even though right now both of my student teachers are secondary people. I ended my career mostly doing lots and lots of secondary, and I work now with Anaheim Union High School District with struggling readers there. And the reason I do secondary is it's even more of a challenge, right? How do we get students involved and engaged in reading when the reading level is so much lower than the content that they should be expected to read by grade level? So it's even more of a challenge when we get to the older grades. So most of these strategies will fit very, very well for elementary teaching, which is what both of you guys are. So let's think about a 5-day plan. And I don't know if you're master teachers or if you're mentor teachers already do this, or this has been modeled to you by a team member, or you already do it yourself, but thinking about something fun to do each day. So on Mondays, the kids know that we're going to play memory or concentration with our vocabulary words or our word identification words. So it doesn't have to just be vocabulary, but you can add vocabulary into it so that students have to say what the word means when they flip the words over. So obviously, you know that you write them on index cards. This is such a cheap way of doing memory. And I go to Target at the beginning of the school year and buy those like 25-cent packs of the index cards, and you can number the backs of them. And so every time they turn a card over, they're reading that word. If you want to throw vocabulary into it, then they get to share what that word means, or they get to problem solve with the small group that they're working with, and they all get to put their heads together and determine what that word means. And then obviously the person with the most pairs wins. But that could be our Monday activity. So every Monday they know they get to look forward to practicing those words, and it's a little game. And so they get right into it pretty quickly. And then day 2, you're going to use those same cards and they can play Go Fish. And so you can of course expand it and do play Go Fish with your science words for that day or your social studies words or however you want to do it. Or if you feel like they still need the practice from day 1, then they can play Go Fish on day 2. So obviously they're going to ask each other for a match. So they have to be able to read that word and maybe even say what it means to be able to get the pair from a partner. So Go Fish is day 2. And then on day 3 or Wednesday, you could take any board game like a Sorry game, and you just need the game pieces and the dice. And you would use those same index cards. I'm very, very resourceful as a teacher, and have the students roll the dice and pick up the number of cards based on what they rolled. And they only get to move forward for the number of cards that they read correctly. Or if it's vocabulary that at that point you want to focus on, because they've had a couple of days of practicing the vocabulary, then they get to move forward that number of cards that they read correctly or that they said the meaning correctly. So that's kind of a fun way, and that's easy because you can get board games. I have a million I'd love to hand out and share with you guys that my kids don't always play anymore. My kids still play Monopoly a lot though, so I can't share the Monopoly, but lots of other games that you can get at garage sales or whatever as well. Day 4, so on your Thursday, they know today they get to play Tic Tac Toe. And when we go on study abroad trips, I always use the very, very easy resource of the sheet protectors that are plastic and the dry erase markers. So you can have students on a piece of typing paper draw the tic-tac-toe board and fill out the tic-tac-toe board with their words, their vocab words, their reading words, and then they slide it right into the sheet protector. So you can keep reusing those sheet protectors. I don't know. Have you guys ever used those before instead of using a whiteboard?
Yeah,
Where you
I
got like
have.
those little plastic folders? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So super easy. And that's just a really fun way. And they're able, if once they read a word, then they get to capture that box. Super easy. But these are all just little supplementary ideas so that they know, yay, today is Thursday, we get to play tic-tac-toe. That's awesome. You know, whatever. So they're looking forward to the day. They're looking forward to that little supplementary activity when they complete their work or just as extra practice. And then, so then day 5, your Friday, they could do road race. So obviously this is drawn really sloppily because I had to do it on PowerPoint. But obviously you could do it. You could have them also use a sheet protector and have them draw their board, on their paper. And they would get their stack of cards and they would write those words. And this would be a speed race. So to see how quickly they can read those words. They've been practicing all week, and maybe how quickly they would also be able to share what those words mean. And then they would get a little prize, a little mint, a pretzel, however you do, an extra minute of free time if they read all their words correctly at the end of the racetrack. So those are 5 activities. You can fill in with any of the strategies that we're going to start talking about within the rest of the presentation. But I encourage you to think about, so the kids know that on each day they get to do something fun and they're looking forward to that fun activity, whether it's one of these 5 or anything that I'm going to talk about within the rest of the presentation. Do any of those 5? I'm sure you've done those before, or do any of those 5 sound like something you could use pretty quickly with your students, or it sounds fun to them?
Yes, for sure. And then I've also, because I'm asynchronous, I've also been doing Kahoots and like Pear Decks too.
Oh, very cool. Love it. Awesome. Awesome. So yeah, having to be virtual has helped us to be insanely creative, right? And we've gotten really good at all kinds of things. So these are some low tech ways, and I know you guys are good at all the high tech ways as well. I think I did a presentation maybe a couple of months ago that's recorded, I believe on the website, that was virtual ideas as well. So we could also access that presentation, and it's totally different strategies than what are listed here. So okay, so what I want to do now is I have several slides that are strategies for struggling readers. So I want to go down and just talk you through each one of them pretty quickly. I don't want it to be boring because we're trying to be fun, right? But just to give you some ideas and some ways to think about reading. And one of the things I used to do, I used to actually have a list of strategies for writing or for reading. And each day I would actually go down the list and I would have the kids do a new fun idea on how to think of that story or look at that text in a new way. And so that's one of the things I used to do when I was teaching. This sounds very, very low tech and simple, but it made it fun because it was something a little bit different each day. So then I would put a little check by it and I would move all the way down the list so that every day we were looking at a story in a different way or reading a new story with a new way to analyze those characters or that setting or the plot or whatever. So that's kind of the idea of these strategies now. So one of the things that I think you could do would be to talk to your students about being an explorer. We are going to find treasures inside this book. So you're going to talk up this book, how excited you are about the fact that we're going to be reading this story together or in small groups or however you're going to do it. And we're going to take a trip inside this book. And obviously, depending on the book and the content, we're going to find those treasures. So I want you to find as many animals as you can, and you're going to name the animal and name something that that animal did. Or I want you to think about your favorite character in this story, or your favorite picture, or the favorite setting, or the favorite toy that's advertised, or whatever that's talked about in this story. And they're going to focus on that. So the whole entire story, they're listening, they're following the meaning, but they have a focus on being an explorer inside that book. So it's one way to help focus their brains and give them a goal of something to be looking for. So that was one thing that I used to do a lot with my students, because otherwise, if they would just sit and just read and, okay, done with the book, I'm done, right? And there was no goal sort of until the end, when you have them answer questions and have them write responses to questions that you have. But this might get them engaged throughout the reading and have them be thinking before the reading of what to do while they're reading. Another one, I used to use newspapers, and now we could use our sheet protectors if we were able to put a worksheet or a text within that sheet protector and have the students look for those common words. It might just be sight words if that's what your students are working on. It might be that you have previewed this text and you know that several of their vocabulary words are in there, and they can go through and highlight or circle or underline those keywords that they're looking for within the reading. And that'll help them to focus on that word identification and that sight word automaticity. How do I say that? Automaticity. Sorry, I've said that word 1,000 times in my life. So that's kind of something fun to be able to build that for our students. Another thing would be focus on their elaboration of a story. So they're going to be a storyteller. So when this story is done, they're going to retell this story to a partner or to a small group or whatever they would feel comfortable doing. And they're going to elaborate on more details about that character, more details about that setting, more details about the ending of a story, and to be able to say maybe what the character was thinking or what they should have done instead. And so you can take that one 50 different ways and have students really be involved. So you can tell them, we're not just reading this story, you're going to need to retell, and you're going to need to come up with a different ending or add what the character was wearing, because we don't have pictures in this particular book, or change any piece of the story. And you can have them be thinking about that throughout the story. Of course, we have our kids do dramatic play and bringing a story to life, but have them actually act out the character, or have them be a couple different characters within a small group and have them try to match what they think the character's voice would have sounded like, their face, maybe any facials that they would have done, or how they would have walked or carried themselves. And they could really get into the story that way. So all of these ideas are really to get them thinking about what they're reading and to be focused on more details and more elaboration. Do any of those sound like stuff you've done before, or that you have seen taught, or that would be fun for your students?
Yeah, I think that it'll be fun. I was just curious when I asked you this question. So I was recently in an SDC classroom. It was TK through second grade. And some of them are EL learners. How would you think that maybe, how would I like make it more engaging, but not, I guess, in a time when to still capture their attention? Would I just do maybe like a felt board and make the story shorter? Or I was just thinking about that. Like,
It's harder the younger they are and the more language issues, but then that's even more of a reason to bring in music, to bring in some sort of drama where it might even be you acting out a piece of that story and having a student that might have understood that story being able to play along with you, you know. I think one of the things that we get ourselves caught up in is having them read out loud in front of the class, and struggling readers are very slow readers, as you know, with no expression. And I think we lose a lot of kids by having them do that. I want them to read out loud. Don't misunderstand. I encourage that reading out loud, but reading out loud when you're trying to have them focus on comprehension of a story, then that makes it really slow, especially if they're lower level readers. So it might be that your pacing and your expression is going to be focused on, and that you would do more simple things. So maybe they would draw the character and be able to, share how they think the ending could have been different, or something on a much lower level. So maybe even like, what pets would the character have had, or what would the character have wanted to eat, or just have them, we're trying to help them to kind of be involved with the character, but stretch their thinking a little bit. So I think it is a little bit harder when they're that young, especially if we know that they have a diagnosed disability, a reading disability, or if they're an English learner, it's tough. But I think there are some different ideas as we go along that you'll see that might help. I'm hoping.
Thank you.
Okay, so another one is expressing the emotions. So I think that if they are understanding the story, they can share how that character's feeling. And I love this because I love all the social emotional learning and how we need to be modeling that and teaching that empathy for each other. And so I think having the students, before you do the reading, focus on the fact that we're going to be talking about how this character felt when all the kids left him out at the lunch tables, or, whatever the situation might be. But I think it's a great way to teach empathy and help them really be focusing on someone's feelings. It gets you a little bit more into the lesson if you have something to focus on before that story begins. So another one is when you're reading a lower level story, maybe to TK or K, is actually having them move. So if there's a monkey that's stomping his feet or jumping or shaking his fist or whatever, you can really have them be moving and doing those motions along with that character. And then that might help that story stick into their brains a little bit. So another one might be having them talk like an expert. So let's pretend that they're reading about a monkey, and you might want to have them work a little bit and learn about monkeys. What do monkeys like to eat? Where do they live? Which countries are they from? What kind of families do they have? All of that. And then you can help them to expand that story a little bit by learning more about whatever that story was about. In this case that I'm referring to, like a monkey, and learning a little bit more. And then you can do some cross-disciplinary lessons by focusing on science a little bit and that reading as well. So that kind of keeps them interested in the story also. And then make a movie in your mind. So having them tell them ahead of time, that you're going to be making a movie in your mind. And kids are so good on the computer nowadays. There's so many different ways that they could sort of recreate that story, either as a movie or even just creating a little timeline online that shows about that story, so that you can monitor for their understanding and that they understood that meaning. And then I already mentioned earlier is that goal setting is we set goals for ourselves as teachers, and then also help the kids to set goals for themselves. So it's that stamina. And I think that does get them engaged and involved. And you can even do this with really little kids and encourage them at home that they can borrow a book to take home to read out loud to their mom or dad for that night. Then how about drawing a party ladder? So this could be a system in your class, or it could be individualized for students, that they have an actual ladder, so up on the board. So the first step of the ladder is that they're going to read 5 pages, or however many pages is appropriate for what you teach. And the next step of the ladder is that they're going to jot a thought. So after reading those 5 pages, they get to write anything at all that came into their mind. And then the next rung of the ladder is that they read 5 more pages. The next rung is that they're going to take a break and they're going to draw something about that story. Then they might read 5 more pages, and then they might take a break to have a little snack or a mint or whatever. So this gives them a goal to work themselves all the way up the ladder with different activities to do within. So I don't know if you can think of what other ideas would you have within the party ladder rungs? So they read 5 pages, they draw a picture, they read 5 more pages. Maybe they get to turn to a friend and tell them their favorite part of the story. Any other ideas you might have for that?
Is this something that you would do during the class and in small groups, or is this more independent time?
So I think that you could do it as an entire class if it's conducive to your group, or you could do it even with small groups and tell them, you know, this is going to be our goal. So you're working with 2 or 3 other people. And I want you as a small group to be reading these 5 pages or 2 pages or whatever. 5 might be too many depending on the book. And as soon as you guys finish reading that out loud to each other, the next thing you're going to do is draw a picture. Okay, everybody draw a picture, right? Next, then you're going to read 2 more pages, 5 more pages. Now you need to tell each person in your group your favorite part of the story, right? So you can create it and make it to the best of what you think is going to be for your group. But I think it kind of gives them some motivation because they're like, oh, yay, we get to go have a break for a couple of minutes, or we're going to try to get through this book and we're going to beat this other group or whatever. So I think you could do little group competitions. You could do it as a whole class. This is how we do our reading, you know. The only thing I would say is I don't want to slow down any students that are a little bit quicker, that might want to get through it quicker. So in those instances, it could be individualized. You can do it however you think it would work the best with your students. But this is another idea of like setting goals, right? So by the end, we're going to get through 5 steps of our ladder. And I need everybody. That means you've read 25 pages. You've each jotted down a thought. You've each drawn a picture. You've each shared an idea with a friend. You've each taken a little break to have a quick drink of water or a snack. And then we're going to finish up our last 5 pages, you know? So it helps them to focus on that reading and then know that it's not like going to never end, right? Because you sit them in groups, right? It goes on and on and on. So it's just something kind of to look forward to within every few pages. I don't know if it would work for your group. It just depends on the group, you know, but I like it because it keeps them focused and they sort of set natural goals of what they're going to get done in that time period.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, I think it's fun. Also a Fluency Phone, this is old days, but people still use them and kids can read to themselves quietly and hear that feedback. This will build their fluency. Let's bring back some of these things because they can read to themselves a little bit and be able to hear how well they're doing. And they love it. You know, kids always love that kind of stuff. What about having them map it? So tell them before we read a story, we are going to be looking at the character's movement. So every time a character, let's say he starts off and he's at his house and he's eating cereal for breakfast. So you're going to visualize that he's eating cereal for breakfast, right? And you can even have them draw it. And then the next step is, oh my goodness, he went and got on the school bus, or he went to the park, or he went to his grandma's house or whatever. And you can have them map it by finding 5 different places that character went during that story or whatever. And that'll help them to memorize the story and remember what's going on. It's just another focusing tool, but it's a good way. Reading is fun if we're focused and we can stay up with what's going on with the character and the setting. What about having them focus on what's in a character's heart? Stories don't always tell us this directly, but have them tell them, this is going to be really important that when we read this story, you're able to tell me what this character was really like inside. Is this a good character? Is this a bad character? What was evil about this person? And it's forcing them to critically think about the events that occur in that story and putting it back onto that character and trying to think maybe a little bit outside of the box of what the story is actually telling us. And then what about what can this character teach us? So this might be for a little bit older, upper elementary, where you're reading a story and we're like, okay, when we get ready to read this story, I want you to think about what I can learn from this guy. So what do I think this author is trying to teach me? And how can I implement that into my life with my friends? That kind of thing. And then before we start the story, we're going to tell the students, you're going to think about what you're left with. So the story is over. What is the big idea? So we're not just going to read the story. Okay, everybody, let's read the story. We have questions at the end to answer. I actually saw somebody do this today in a lesson that I was supervising. I'm like, no, we need to focus them on something, right? So that they stay up with it. They're not just like drowning out ideas. So I want you the whole entire story. You need to be thinking about what is that big idea? And we're going to reread the ending. What actually occurred in this book? So it gives them something to focus on again. Okay.
Pearson, do you mind restating what you just said not to do?
To have
You
that
said, okay, go ahead.
Well, I think I was referring to a lesson that I observed today where there was no pre-teaching of the vocabulary. There was nothing to focus on or look forward to. It was, okay, open your books and turn to page 3, and we're going to read this story. Then the story was done, and we have 4 questions we're going to answer, right?
Okay.
So to me, I would think either, hey, there was some vocabulary that needed to be pre-taught, because otherwise you're going to bore them to tears if they don't know what these things mean. Even with the context clues, this needs to be spelled out really clearly to our students, the pre-reading piece, right? And then having them have something to focus on. So these are the 4 questions we're going to answer at the end. So I want you to be thinking about these things or any of these ideas that I've listed. So we're going to be looking for the setting of these characters, of where they are, to help us focus on, where the story is taking place, or what's in their heart, or what they're teaching us, what this character is trying to teach us. In today's story that I observed, it would have been perfect to talk about what this character was trying to teach us and have the students focus on that. But instead, open page 3, start reading. Everybody's sitting there reading. Kids are not engaged. They're bored with the story, right? Because they didn't have anything to focus on. So I think if we can get them to focus on different things and really be thinking about what the point of what we're doing today is, then it'll engage them more and it'll be a little bit more fun. So same idea of when somebody recommends a book to you and the book is really slow, but they tell you, oh my gosh, this is such a good book. It's about this, and they pre-teach you what this book is going to be about. You're like, oh, you kind of stick it out a little bit longer, don't you? Because somebody told you what it was about and you want to get to the good stuff, So I think we need to do a little bit more of that. And, all of these ideas are trying to get us there instead of just reading and answering questions.
Okay, thank you.
Did that answer? Okay. What about having students say, hey, this character is going to make a big mistake if this is, if that's conducive to the book you're having them read. I need you guys to be thinking about what this mistake is. So focus on what leads up to this mistake and what you think that possible lesson is for you and how you might do things differently. So you would pre-teach that idea and have them, which that also would have been conducive to the story that we were reading today in a class. So having them focus on that so that it gives them like, ooh, I'm curious, like what's the mistake that they're going to make, And then what about feelings? And feelings can help us learn. So what do you think the character learned? And this is all inferences. So helping the students actually infer from the story. And a lot of this isn't going to be any wrong answers. The kids are thinking it through and thinking how they might have felt in that scenario. And that's also part of creating that really comfortable environment where kids can be engaged and share and think and comfortably talk about their thoughts with each other. And then of course, Common Core, everything is going back to the text. How do I know this? So detail, having them summarize details and telling them ahead of time, hey, we're going to focus on these 3 details. So you need to focus on where that is going to be in the book. So I'm going to ask you about those details. So you pre-teach what you kind of want them to be looking for in the story. It keeps their engagement high. And then, of course, monitoring for meeting. This is like the study skills that my college students, my own kids still use to this day, is reading something, covering it, having to remember it, and retell. So you're going to tell the kids that when we're reading, so they're not just, sitting there unengaged, not listening, their brain is focused on what they're going to eat for lunch. But you're going to have to retell to a small group. So you're going to be thinking about details. So we're going to read it. We're going to cover it up with our hand or with a piece of paper. I'm going to remember what we just read, and then I'm going to retell it to my partner. So that keeps them engaged and more focused on that reading. And then book-to-book connections. So if you are reading a couple of different books about a similar character in history or an event in history or animals, and they get to figure out how these books are related or how the book's information was similar or different. And that would be a little bit for older elementary students and up, so that synthesizing piece. And then what about just having them read with a sense of wow? Saying like, we are gonna not just read words, but we're gonna read with curiosity and interest. So if a sentence goes by and I wasn't focused on it, I'm gonna reread that so that I make sure I'm focused on that actual text, so I know what's going on. This is a strategy that adults need to use too, right? When you're reading a book and you're a little bored by it, you're like, oh, I need to go back and reread that and know exactly what was being said. Okay, any comments on any of the strategies so far? We're going to run out of time, so I'm going a little bit quickly. I'm so sorry, but I'd rather give you a ton of ideas because I think you guys get it, and just to give you things you could maybe do with your kids tomorrow or this week, hopefully.
Yeah, I like the ideas of you know, how to engage them during the reading, because we do some of that in our class where I'll be reading along and then I pause and they have to say the word that I haven't read yet, just to kind of get them participating. Sometimes we read through a paragraph that way, and then they know that we're going to talk about it and I'm going to ask them some questions about what's in that paragraph. So, but when we do that, you know, that's the only thing we do. It'd be nice to have other ways to, you know, engage them during the reading. So I really like a lot of these ideas.
Well, and you can even have them write down an idea. Like, so say you're going to have them look for the character's mistake or whatever, right? Or write it down, have them write it down. So what are we looking for when we read this story? We're going to look at this character's heart, or we're going to figure out, you know, where is this character? Because this book doesn't say it clearly or whatever. Like, and have them write it down so they know, okay, this is what I'm looking for. So now guess what? Everybody, let's stop. We just read a paragraph. What do you think? And have them write or draw a little bit of a picture or whatever to respond to what they're looking for, what their focus is, right? It's really a great way to keep them engaged. I mean, I watched a lesson today that, like I said, the students had no clue what was going on. They didn't know the vocabulary ahead of time. They were just going to answer these 4 questions. They were able to answer the first question and not the next 3. So how can we do, and this is an absolute awesome teacher. So the point is, I'm telling you, based on my own experiences of what I've learned, and I look back, I'm like, oh, I could have done that so much better, right? We're just always learning and growing, which is the point of why we're doing these webinars, because it's fun to talk through ideas and stuff, but even have them focus on their piece of paper. So if they have a reading journal and they have a notebook and they're writing down, so today, Monday, we're going to be focusing on this. And then once you're done reading, they can write what they think. And if they don't know, no problem. Turn and talk to a partner and you get to borrow what your partner read only once or whatever, you know, so that next time you make sure that they're focusing on those ideas. So I just think it's a really good way rather than just reading and answering questions, and it keeps them more engaged and focused. So what about sentence starter sticks or even just pieces of paper? You don't even have to buy the popsicle sticks because they're a little bit more expensive, but have them pull a sentence starter stick to communicate and collaborate with their small groups or a partner, or you can have your para-educator with one group and you can be with another and have the groups be a little bit larger. But I agree with you, because each strip can have these different sentence starters. You can make them up based on the story. I'd like to add on to what you said. What do you think about? And then the student has to fill in, why do you think blank? This might not be right, but, or in addition to that. So you can think of these sentence starters and have the kids help each other out, not to make it stressful, not to put them on the spot at all, but to really develop that comfortable discussion type of an atmosphere, and it gets them all engaged for sure. Here's kind of a fun idea, using little Post-it notes. So you could use your whiteboard or just a poster board or even just a wall. And this topic is going to be about monkeys, let's say, whatever topic you're learning about that day. And you can have them, okay, everything we've studied about monkeys. So we read these books about monkeys, we researched about monkeys, where they're from and what they like to eat and what activities they like to do. Now I want you to write down a new idea about monkeys on every single Post-it note that you can fill out. So they're writing down, they like to eat bananas, whatever. This is obviously a dumb, simple example. And then one student gets to go up and say, hey, I thought of the idea of what monkeys like to eat, and this is what I put down. And then every student that had a similar idea on their Post-it note, they get to go and put it on the top of that Post-it note. So then it kind of reinforces that learning. It gets them to focus on what they were reading. And it kind of it's a good idea for even a full unit on a topic, and to check for understanding. I think that's one of the things I work on with my student teachers. The two main things I work on with them is student engagement and involvement, and always that informal assessment. So this is just a quick little assessment, and the kids don't even know they're getting assessed, right? A little progress monitoring goes a really long way as a teacher to know, okay, the next day, only one kid put this. We really need to go back over that idea and make sure to reteach that the next day. So it kind of gives you a good barometer on that learning. And then, oh my gosh, I'm going to run out of time. I'm so sorry, Dr. Rao, what is new? This is a story of my life.
It's okay. Keep going. And, that folks have been asking questions and participating throughout. So I don't know that we need a long Q&A session at the end. So just keep going. Another 8 minutes or so is cool if you want to.
Awesome. Okay. So, and feel free to pop off if you need to, because I am talking a lot and that's never my plan, but I'd rather give the ideas, right? And have some strategies. So how about keep the line alive? So have them in a big circle. Can you say more about that? And then the student talks about the story, and then the next person has to agree or disagree with whatever that person said. And then the next person gets to say, I heard you say this. And it just kind of keeps going around the circle, and it keeps that story alive. And they're starting to think. That's a lot of critical thinking and a lot of communication and a lot of talking about that story to reinforce those ideas, the plot, the learnings, especially if it was nonfiction. Conversation cooperation, so collaborating, having them work together on their goal, having them talk together about it, about what they were writing in their notebook. And then of course, play your part. Everyone has a role. You all know that. Sketch a memory, that's a great one. But how about they come in the next day and you say, hey, remember the story we read yesterday? And we talked about that character's heart. What do you remember about that? And I need you to quickly draw a picture in your notebook or write a few sentences. I have to tell you guys, honestly, I'm a horrible artist. So even when I was little and the teacher would say draw, I'd be like, oh, heck no. So give kids another alternative, right? Same thing if they don't like to write, allow them to draw and try to bring in that learning. That's one of the things I'm working with right now on my student teachers as well, is like, wait a minute, you feel like you're right in the middle of something, but what did you do yesterday? They need to be reminded of what they did yesterday, right? And then what about when they have a text and they could also be within that sheet protector and they're going to write, oh my gosh, when I'm reading this, these are my symbols. I get to say LOL if it's funny. I get to put a star if it's an important learning. I get to have an exclamation point if this was a surprising piece of the story. This surprised me. Question mark if it's confusing, or a heart if this was my favorite part of the story. So this is a metacognitive strategy. Somebody mentioned that at the very beginning, and really thinking about that learning and how this text actually touches me as a reader and as a learner. And so they get used to making these little symbols, and that also helps them to go back and say, wait, this was confusing. I need you to explain this to me. So it's really easy for you as a teacher to pop around the room and see like, oh gosh, they loved this story, or they have a lot of question marks. I need to make sure to teach that vocabulary again, or go over that piece of the plot or that part of the learnings. Okay, how about stop and jot? So when they're learning something new, or they see a new image, they're bursting with creativity, or they want to draw out a new word, allow them to stop and jot. And that's a really cute phrase to use. Hey, in our class, if you see something you want to remember, you can put it into your reading notebook. So maybe each day they're going to write down that story or that topic that you're learning about or focusing about. And then under that, it's stop and jot. So it's a lot of notes. It's a lot of drawings. It's a lot of new words they want to remember. It's a great way to be able to come back the next day and say, hey, let me see your stop and jot from yesterday. What do you remember? Oh my gosh, look at this. And have them retell you from the day before what those reactions were or those ideas were. And it jogs their memory and gets them back into that same content for the next day. What about a 5-sentence summary? So they get to say it and then they get to write it. So first this happened, next, then finally. So they have to come up with 5 things that occurred in that story. And you're going to tell them to do this before the story starts, right? So we're going to have them focus on the fact that they're going to have to come up with 5 things to summarize. And then that again helps focus them on that learning. In their reading notebooks, they can even write first, then the next line next, then the next line then, and finally, and have them write those things so they can even stop and jot their 5-sentence summary as they're going if you want them to. Then what about a T-chart? This is great for inferences. So from the text on the left side of the T, they're going to actually write what occurred. So what that story was about. And then they get to respond to it on the right. I don't think we do enough of this, is allowing our students to have those reactions and those feelings and that critical thinking about if they liked the character, they didn't like it, or this made me really sad, but someone else said this really wasn't that sad for me because this was resolved or whatever. So it gives some conversation pieces, but most of all, it gives them a chance to actually say what they think. And of course, nothing's wrong. You know, they're able to really be thoughtful about their reactions to that story. Okay, then the last couple things I'm just going to show you really quickly, and I'll let you have a little homework whenever you're ready to do it, is I've presented this before in different webinars, but I can't say enough about a vocabulary map, is having kids work on a vocabulary map. This is from a grant I was involved with, and I still have teachers to this day do this. They write the word. If there's a cognate that's related to another language, students might know they could put it there. Students get to define the word, get to draw a picture. What are synonyms? What are 2 sentences using the words? And then what are 2 questions I would have for a partner about that word? So this could be an overarching vocabulary word of a unit, and you could do a vocabulary map to get them really thinking before a story. And then I love this idea too, but now I'm getting myself too deep in, we've got 5 minutes left. So if you're hanging with me, I'll finish up just 3 more minutes. So what's my word? So students, a picture of my word. So they don't know what the word is. This is a game. So they're asking, what's my word? Everybody else knows what their word is. So they get to go ask a friend to draw a picture of my word. And the friend writes their name and draws a picture. The next one is, where can I see or hear my word? And that friend gets to choose only one of the options there, write their name down, and then where they can see or hear their word. And then the third person gets to talk about a synonym. So this is the same thing as my word. They write their name and they get to tell them. Anyway, it goes all the way through these 5 ideas. So a word in a sentence, an example of my word, they get to do prefix, suffix, root, and then the students get to pick what their word is. So it's just kind of a fun game that they can play. And it's not too much work, and you have it in this PowerPoint. So you could print off this slide or make an easier version. And then I also wanted to show you really quickly illustrated word stories. And this is from a student of mine at the high school level, and the quarantine is really appropriate for now. And so they actually do a definition of it and a picture. Then what's the history of this word? Where did it come from? And do any of the word parts remind you of another word? So this is really detailed, but you'll be able to see it on your PowerPoint, and I'm out of time. But just to show you that where the word comes from is it came from the so-called Black Death. And how did this word become famous? Well, it was spread by trading ships, and it talks about the fleas that the rats carried, and it goes through. So students are building up what that word quarantine means. This is for definitely higher levels, but you can see what quarantine means. So we're out of time, but is there any strategy that you might be thinking you're going to use tomorrow or this week? And there's only 2 of you on, but maybe you could share that strategy with your partner at work or another friend in our program, and keep each other accountable and say, hey, I learned this in Dr. Pierson's presentation, and I really want you to keep me accountable for teaching a couple new ways to teach reading or to help kids be more engaged in reading. So is there one or two that kind of stuck out to you that you might use? And we've got 2 minutes. We're doing good.
I like the stomping it out, acting things out, and then definitely the what's my word is really cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. The what's my word game, that sounded pretty fun to do with them.
It gets them up and moving, right? And they're talking and they're learning somebody else's word. You're learning a whole lot of words when it's not your word, you know?
Yeah. And so I wondered, how is the structure of that game? Like, how does that work? You said it gets them up and moving. Like, are they wandering around the room and finding people and asking questions? Is it kind of like a just get up and find someone?
Yeah. So if you think your kids can do that, that's a really great way to do it. I've seen it work so well. And of course, the kid who has to pick the word is learning the least, you know, probably, but it's not always your turn, right? So everybody gets to be involved, and it's good for, you know, 6 or 7 students in a group, and they love it. Kids are really focused on it and they have a ton of fun with it. So it's just a new way to teach a vocabulary word, or having them say that you had a larger group of vocabulary words from a unit. So they're very familiar with these words, and now you want to test that knowledge. And there's another great example of an informal assessment, progress monitoring, to know that your kids get it, right? Because you're observing, you're having fun playing the game with them, and you're able to see really quickly who needs a little bit more support on which word, that kind of thing. So
yeah. So would you have them do one word at a time with the whole group, or would it be multiple people?
if you have, I would put them in groups of 6. So let's say you had 2 groups going probably, or I don't know how big your groups are, but
2 groups. Yeah.
Yeah. So you could have your para be involved with one group and you could be another, or you could oversee both groups.
Got it.
Then each kid, and then they rotate roles. You know, it's not always going to be my turn to say where you see and hear the word, right? Then everybody gets to shift, and everyone gets a turn at guessing. And if they're wrong, it's no big deal. It's not a stressful thing. And then at the end, you can have the kids, okay, we need to give more clues, you know, and have the kids get involved with, what did we miss? What are we not sharing about this vocabulary word, you know? So it's just like another fun game to get them kind of up and involved and collaborating and communicating with each other. And they're doing it all under the guise of having a blast while they're learning new words and reinforcing vocabulary words, you know?
Yeah, very cool. Thanks.
Okay, you guys, thanks for being on. I know Dr. Rao has a survey really quick for you to complete, but I appreciate your participation today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pierson. That was awesome. So many fun and effective strategies that you shared. It makes me want to get back into a classroom and teach all over again. So thank you so much. That was really great. The survey link is in the chat box. So if you wouldn't mind just taking 2 minutes to go ahead and complete that survey. The name of this presentation was Make Reading Fun. And the next webinar, and it's going to be our last webinar for this semester, is on May 4th at 4 p.m. with Dr. McWayne. What is embedded instruction? So that should be a really great one as well. And of course, we also have a lot of recorded webinars available on our YouTube channel, on the College of Ed YouTube channel that I've sent out to you all. So you can be sure to check those out as well. But thanks so much for joining us. And I hope you all have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Bye.
How can we access the PowerPoint?